I really appreciate the opportunity to present this information to you all, because this is exciting stuff. And I met Robert earlier, who's wearing a Machu Picchu t-shirt from Peru. And a lot of this construction is very similar to what's going on in Machu Picchu and elsewhere in the world. The technique I'm going to take is I need to sort of introduce the subject of ritual stone construction, Native American stone construction. And I'm going to sort of spiral in towards Floyd County and come right up to Floyd County's doorstep. I haven't actually seen any of this kind of construction in Floyd County. I don't doubt that it's there, but we'll get very close. So just this opening slide is Bruiser's Knob on Sinking Creek Mountain on the border between Montgomery and Craig County. Fantastic complex of probably about 300 individual structures. These cairns, which is the term I use for stacked piles. You have stone piles, you have cairns, which are more crafted, and you also have these sort of linear structures, which people tend to call walls, but when you say wall, people think of something that encloses something, or it's side of a room or a house. It's very different than that. It's sort of linear structures that are wall-like. So this kind of construction, stone construction, is well known out west. This is Pueblo Bonito in Chaco Canyon, New Mexico, in the northwestern Four Corners area of New Mexico. And it's partly a ritual structure. It was partly also a habitation. So these kind of structures, when archaeologists started finding them out west, Mesa Verde is another good example. They were immediately recognizable as Native American, plus there were Native Americans around to explain them to some extent. So an interesting aspect of that, by the way, that back wall there with the strut that's supporting it, that's 4 stories tall. This is a massive, massive structure. Put Chaco Canyon on your bucket list as a place. It's just a fascinating place. As I said, it's partly residential, partly ritual. Sort of at the center there, in part of the ruins, there's actually an entire book about a single room at Pueblo Bonito, the room of the cylinder jars, which they found residues of chocolate in. So the people at Chaco Canyon, which was 1,000 miles or more from where cocoa beans were produced in Mesoamerica, they were getting them from Mesoamerica as part of a sort of ritual. In the east, we also have monumental ritual Native American construction. This is an early image of Serpent Mound in Ohio. But the focus has been primarily on the earthen structures. And I think, well, there are many, many reasons, but one reason I think is 200 years ago or so, when they started investigating these, they were full of pots and artwork and burials, and that was the monetary aspect of it was very important to some people. So fortunately, Serpent Mound was preserved. It's a serpent form, but I'm going to talk a lot about something called a serpent monster, which is in the Mississippian period, the last period of Native American culture before European contact. There were these mythical beings called serpent monsters, or horned serpents, that were believed to be gigantic, winged, serpent-like creatures that were somehow involved with the water cycle and weather, etc. There's an archaeologist in Ohio that argues this is actually a Mississippian serpent monster depiction rather than just an ordinary snake. And one reason he says that is those little projections on either side of the head, he identifies those as ear spools, as bling. This was a serpent wearing bling, and the serpent monsters are always shown with necklaces and other accoutrements. So they're otherworldly, they're sort of beings. So also in the east, there are a few examples of ritual stone construction that have been identified as Native American. This is on Fort Mountain in Georgia, and you can see there in the center panel, sort of a zigzagging structure. Oh, actually, it's better depicted up in the right-hand corner. A survey from the 1950s showing the sort of serpent-like, or perhaps lightning-like zigzag form of this structure. So it's great to see this kind of architecture represented and acknowledged in Georgia, for example. There are, I work a lot with archaeologists, and there are some that claim there is none of this construction in Virginia, that somehow it just stops at the state line. So, but I'll be showing a lot of examples, and you can judge for yourself. So to get some terminology in here, this is Native American material culture here. Material culture is any sort of material reflection or consequence of culture. This building, this room, the clothes we're wearing, our technology is all material culture. So this is Native American, and we have two types here. They're both, I should point out, they're both representational. It's material culture that's representing something like a painting or a sculpture. And in fact, that's what we have. On the left is some rock art from Texas, showing some sort of beings. And on the right is a site in Bandelier National Monument in Ohio, which is Yapashi. It's the two lions. And I've heard different accounts whether it's a natural feature that was upgraded a little bit to look like crouching or lying down mountain lions, or maybe it's totally sculptured, but it's a shrine there near Santa Fe. So on the left is pictorial representation. It's two-dimensional, it's on a rock surface. On the right is sculptural or three-dimensional or formal material culture representation. It's an actual sculpture in a sense. Yes?
So are the antlers brought there over time?
If you Google this site, Twin Lions, Bandelier, you'll see it with and without the antlers over time. So I happened to be there, I took this slide in 1985, and at the time, lots of antlers. There's also sort of a stone enclosure around it. You can see that in the background. Yeah. But I've seen more recent views where there's nothing around it. So I'm sure that has some sort of ritual aspect to it. So I mentioned I'm going to sort of circle in circle in towards Floyd County. I'm going to start pretty far afield because this is an amazing, amazing structure that has both the pictorial representation of various things and the sculptural or formal representation. And it's a site in Long Hunter National or State Park, right outside of Nashville, Tennessee, on what's now an impoundment. Would originally have been a hilltop, and now it's a little peninsula there in the lake called the Long Hunter Wall. And here's some LiDAR images of it. It's that sort of hockey stick-shaped form there in the left and the right. The west end on the left is pointed towards or near karst topography, sort of broken up stone, bedrock. The right end is a little more difficult to see, but I'll show both ends. Are you all familiar with LiDAR? Or should I explain that some? Okay, I'll explain it just briefly then. LiDAR is it's sort of a laser imaging of the topography. It's done from airplanes or drones, and it's great because it reflects off of the ground surface, and it strips all vegetation. So you can have a heavily forested area with various things inside it, and you can have also almost like an X-ray of the landscape. It's kind of interesting when you see LiDAR imagery that's available at the USGS website of houses and buildings. They look like deflated bouncy houses. I don't know why it is. It doesn't pick up their form, but for things on the land like various roadways and stuff, and I'll have other LiDAR images, it just pops. Whoops. So here is the Long Hunter Wall. It has three sections. One is the sort of horizontal masonry at the bottom. At the top is this crest. Sometimes it's called an angled coping in European-derived stonework, where you have a wall. Sometimes they'll do a little decorative stonework. But in the European examples, it's almost always just a single little layer of stone. This is this exuberant pile that dips and rises and has a lot of polychrome, and I'll explain that. And then the third section is this slightly overhanging coping or ledge that sort of like a tabletop or perhaps an altar top that the stonework on top is resting on. So here's that west end at the top that points towards the karst topography, and here's my drawing of it. Is it showing all of it? Yes. Okay. And The drawing is to, I mentioned polychromy. Polychromy is in architecture and sculpture, it's the use of color. So for instance, a Victorian house that has its original paint scheme with all sorts of different colors would be an example of polychrome, it'd be polychromatic. So this wall is polychromatic, and that's part of the pictorial representation that's going on here. And to sort of show it a little more clearly, I've done this illustration that shows some of the forms that are sort of brownish in color. This is sandstone, and then the more, what's shown as white, the grayish color in the photograph at the top, is limestone. This stone wall is interesting for many reasons, but one is this is not stuff that was just picked up on site. This was brought into this location because it's rock from different strata. And some of the sandstone has sort of a reddish appearance. I'm going to focus in on this form right here, this linear form with this red end to it. There it is, there. Okay, now I got up here. Here it is in close-up. I interpret this as a serpent form, and more likely a serpent monster. It's about 11 feet long. And it's that brownish stone. It's not crystal clear what's going on the left end. It's sort of a bifurcation, which is actually in Mississippian art from Cahokia area. There are representations of snakes that bifurcate, they split in two and become gourd vines and other things. And then there's that red end, and there it is close up. Whether that is the natural coloration or whether this is sandstone that has been heat treated to get that reddish color, which was done by the, when I showed Chaco Canyon, that was built by the ancestral Pueblo people. And they had done that in their sites from 1,000 years ago or so. It has this sort of snouted form, and you'll see that a lot in the slides coming up. And here's a serpent monster. Looks a little bit like my dog when she's running for a pull rope. But wonderful wings. They're often shown with rattles, so they're modeled somewhat on rattlesnakes, which of course are the most feared and revered